Well, hello there. Yay. Here we are. The second section, Chapter 1B, Anatomical Terms. Now, this is something that I covered in my lab, and Dr. Anai has probably already covered in yours. Just to make sure we're all on the same page, I'm going to go through this a little bit here. So let's see what we have. The naming scheme, everything needs a name. That's what anatomy is. The naming of body parts and their description in relation to other body parts, it needs a standard frame of reference. So how do we describe the position of a person? We do that in what's called the anatomical position, where the body is erect, the feet are slightly apart, palms facing forward. That's important. The palms face forward, and what's called the supine position, and the thumbs pointing off to the sides, eyes straight ahead. So once we get there, we have a series of directional terms. These are, as I implied in a previous presentation, relative. Remember the discussion of Dallas and the DFW airport? So we use these directional terms to describe the relationship of one body part to another, or an aspect of the body, a view of the body. And here's an important point. Right and left refer to the body being viewed, not the right and left of the observer. So it's about the patient. It's about the person you're dealing with. Their right side, their left side. So first couple of terms, superior and inferior. Superior is toward the head. The very top of the head is the most superior point, and away from the head is inferior. And we use this term in the head, neck, and trunk of the body, not, I repeat, not the arms and legs. So here's an example. The abdominal cavity, which we haven't had yet, but we will in a minute, and the head. The head is superior to the abdomen. That makes the abdomen inferior to the head. The navel is inferior. The navel is inferior to the chin. That makes the chin superior to the navel. And the next one, anterior and posterior, you see in parentheses here, ventral and dorsal with a little asterisk. The terms ventral and anterior are synonymous in humans. So you could use either one. And you're more likely to use anterior and posterior and for general body structures, and ventral and dorsal when talking about the central nervous system in general. That means, when I say in general, that means most of the time, but there are exceptions. So anterior and ventral are synonymous, posterior and dorsal are synonymous in humans. But when a little creature gets on its four legs, like my dog friends, then anterior is their head and ventral is their belly. Posterior is their butt and dorsal is their back. Think dorsal fin on a shark. So anterior is toward the front, posterior is toward the back. Breastbone or sternum is anterior to the spine. It's in front of. Sternum's right about here. Spinal cord is back here. The heart is posterior to the breastbone. At least it should be. Then we also have terms medial, lateral, and in between. The long axis of the body, straight up and down the body, the longitudinal length, longest axis of the body is medial, middle. All right, lateral is away from the middle. Lateral, medial, lateral. All right, the heart is medial to the arm, making the arm lateral to the heart. That's a pretty weird example, but there it is right there. The arms are lateral to the chest, making the chest medial to the arms. And the collarbone is in between, intermediate. So the collarbone's right about here. So it's in between. So we'll see for in between, we'll see the term intermediate or sometimes middle for intermediate. Then for the arms and legs, we use superior and inferior for the head, the trunk, head, neck, and trunk of the body. In the arms and legs, we use proximal and distal. Proximal is in proximity, and the most proximal part is where the appendage attaches to the trunk of the body. So the shoulder is the most proximal part of the arm, and the hip is the most proximal part of the leg. And so proximal is closer to the root of the shoulder, distal is farther away. The elbow, right about there, is proximal to the wrist. It's closer to the shoulder than the wrist is. The knee is distal to thigh. A name for the thigh, but we'll get to that in a moment. So proximal and distal in the arms and legs. Superficial and deep. Superficial is toward the surface of the body. Deep is away from the surface of the body. So the skin is superficial to the skeletal muscles. Yeah, and that makes the skeletal muscles deep to the skin. Sure hope so. So you've already noticed that there are two major subdivisions of the body, the axial, head, neck, and trunk, and the appendicular, arms and legs, the appendages. And then we have regional terms for other areas of the body. So let's go through some of those. Cephalic generally refers to the head. Frontal is the forehead region. It's also the name of the muscle that's just deep to the skin here, the frontalis. And the skull bone that's right here is the frontal bone. Orbits refer to eyes. Nasal refers to nose. Buccal is cheek, isn't it? Cheeky. Oral for mouth. Mental is for the chin. I never could figure out where that term came from. Cervical means neck, refers to the neck region. And in the trunk of the body, we have the thoracic region, which is superior to the abdominal region. And the boundary between the thoracic region and the abdominal region is the diaphragm. And in the thoracic region on the outside, superficial, we have the sternum or sternal region, breastbone right there. Axillary, the armpit, where you find those stinky apocrine glands. Mammary, in the mammary gland area. The umbilical, that's the belly button, the navel. We have the pelvic region. The inguinal region refers to the groin. Pubic region, where we find the external genitalia. The acromial region is in the shoulder. There's even a part of the shoulder blade up here called the acromion. Brachial refers to the upper arm region. Antebrachial. No, that's on the other side. Wrong picture. Oh, there it is. Forearm. Down here, we have the carpals. Where is it? There it is. Carpal region is the wrist. The name of the bones in the wrist are the carpals. Manus refers to the hand, as in manual. Palmar for the palm of the hand. The digits for the fingers or phalanges, and the pollex. The thumb has its own name, pollex. I hope you're giving a pollex up to this presentation. Coxal refers to the hip region. Femoral is the thigh region. The femoral artery runs inside the thigh. Actually, the femoral artery, let's use our words, the femoral artery runs generally in the medial region of the femoral portion of the body. The name of the kneecap is the patella, and so the front of the knee is the patellar region. Crural for the front of the leg when you jam your shin on something. The pedal refers to foot. That's how you pronounce this word, pedal, not pedal. But you use your foot to pedal a bicycle, don't you? The name of the ankle area is tarsal. One of the things I tell my lab students is wrist and ankles go in alphabetical order. You start up the head, and C for carpals comes before it's alphabetical, T and tarsal. Metatarsals make up the arch of the foot, and then we have the digits of the toes. And of course, the large toe or great toe, big toe, has its own name, the hallux. Going around back, what do we have that's new here? The elbow. Posterior aspect of the elbow is called the olecranon region. There's a part of one of the bones in the forearm called the olecranon process, which extends into the elbow. Then we have anything new here? The back of the knee. The back of the knee, posterior aspect of the knee, is the popliteal region. And there's some aspects back here. Not only is this region called popliteal, there's a pulse point back here where you can palpate an artery, the popliteal artery, and take somebody's pulse in their leg. I'll tell you about that in A&P too. There's also a muscle back here called the popliteus. Sural for calf. Calcaneal is the heel, and that's also the name of the bone. That big bone that makes up the heel is the calcaneus. Then we get the plantar region, bottom of the foot. Plantar. Don't get plantar fasciitis. That's an inflammation of the, it's like bursitis, only in the bottom of the foot. You don't want that. Otic for ear, occipital for the back of the head. All right, just deep to the skin is the occipitalis muscle, and the name of the bone in that region is the occipital bone. Shoulder blades, the shoulder blade's called the scapula, so the region is called the scapular region. Right down the middle of the back is the vertebral region. Lumbar in the abdominal area. Sacral, that's the name of the bone there, the sacrum, is the very lowest part of the back. And then the butt cheeks are known as the gluteal region. And there are 3 gluteus muscles. There's a gluteus maximus, gluteus medius, and a gluteus minimus, all in there somewhere. And perineal between the anus and the external genitalia. Yes, there's actually a name for that, and it ain't what you thought it was. Body planes, surfaces along which body or structures may be cut for anatomical study. As a matter of fact, as we go through all this stuff, we'll see actual pictures of people that have been sectioned after they're dead, of course, and they have donated their body to science. Here's the 3 of them. We'll talk about these from a picture. Yes. There we go. Here's the picture. All right, so it's easier to describe from the picture. So the longitudinal axis of the body goes along this way. If you cut right down the middle to where you have a right and a left half of the body, that is a sagittal section. If it's right smack dab in the middle, it's a mid-sagittal section. We take a slice that gives us a front and a back. It's called a frontal or sometimes coronal plane, where you have an anterior and a posterior portion. And then 90 degrees to the long axis is transverse. And here is some MRI pictures resulting from these same cuts. And you see that they give us very different pictures of the inside of the body. The body cavities. There are 2 sets of cavities. There's the dorsal and the ventral body cavity. All right, let's roll with this from a picture. Here is the dorsal cavity, which contains the spinal cord and should be the brain. Here, the cranial cavity contains the brain, or at least it should. We all know about some of those people out there that make us wonder, right? And the spinal cord is in the dorsal cavity. And then we have the ventral body cavity, which contains the thorax, the abdomen, and the pelvic cavity. We take a look, a frontal view. This would be a sagittal section. This would be a frontal or coronal section. We see the thorax and abdomen are separated by the diaphragm. We have the mediastinum, through which some of the important blood vessels roll through there, as well as the trachea and the esophagus. We have on either side of the heart, or should I say lateral to the heart, we have the pleural cavities in which we find the lungs. And then we get the pericardial cavity. Peri, around, cardia, the heart. Then we have the abdominal, or sometimes, as written over here, abdominal pelvic cavity. All these were described from the picture. And we have some membranes inside. A membrane in this context is a sheet of cells, epithelial cells. And some organs are encased in a thin double-layered membrane where there's an inner membrane and an outer membrane. Since I skipped over this, I guess. The ventral body cavity houses the internal organs, collectively called the viscera. Guts. That's what that means to me. Visceral. A visceral feeling. So, where were we? Oh, I got lost. All right, so these organs that have a double layer membrane to them. The one that's closest to the organ is the visceral. The visceral serosa. And parietal is the outermost of the two membranes. And in between is a small space filled with lubricating fluid called serous fluid. Now they get its name depending on where it is. So let's look at these two. Let's look at pericardium. The pericardium, here we are, around the heart. There's two layers. There's the visceral layer, which is right up against the heart. There's the parietal layer, parietal pericardium, which is outside of the visceral. And in between is a space filled with lubricating fluid, the pericardial space. It's sort of like, this is a good diagram up here. If you took a balloon and stick your fist into it, you would have the rubber of the balloon up against your hand. That's analogous or like the visceral pericardium. Then you would have that rest of the balloon out here. This would be analogous to the parietal pericardium. And in between, you'd have some air, which would be analogous to the serous fluid. Now, if you did this, you could wiggle your fingers a bit and not mess with anything that's outside the balloon. And that's the idea here, because the lungs, which are over here in the pleural cavities, have their own double layer membrane, and it's called the pleural cavities. And so the lungs expand and contract over here, and they mind their own business, and the heart goes lubbed up over here, and the heart minds its own business, and they don't interfere with each other because they're not in the exact same space. Here's our first homeostatic imbalance. What happens if something goes wrong? You think anything can go wrong of any of those? Well, there can be inflammations in both the pleural cavity and the pericardial cavity, which result in pleurisy and pericarditis. Where's pericarditis? It's not here. Painful, I hear. Normally, the smooth layers that slide across each other nice and easily because of that slick serous fluid in the cavity, which is analogous to snot. Think about how slippery and lubricating snot is. That's the stuff that we find there, lubricating these organs, and results in excruciating pain. Pleurisy. Now, I think that this should be called pleuritis, inflammation of the pleura. But what do I know? Nobody listens to me, not even my dogs. A way of dividing the abdominal cavity by quadrants: right upper quadrant, left upper quadrant, left lower quadrant, right lower quadrant. And something to point out right here is notice that it's about the patient, it's about the person, not you. It's easy to see when you get the whole person in front of you. This is the person's right side, this is the person's left side. So I'm going to stick with that one and skip the more complicated one. I like the quadrant one better myself. There are some other body cavities that are not quite as large as the thoracic, abdominal, and pelvic. We have the cavities in the mouth, the oral cavity. There's space in the digestive system where the food goes, which I think I'm going to need to do something about that here in a moment. It's past lunchtime. My digestive cavity has some room in it. The nasal cavity inside the nose, the orbits where the eyeballs are. We have a little space inside the middle ear. We even have a little fluid-filled space inside the inner ear as well. The synovial cavities, that's where many of the joints, not just the big ones like the hip, the shoulder, and the knee, but other little ones like in the fingers and wrists. Those are called synovial cavities, and there's synovial fluid in those. And we'll get to that when we get to the articulation chapter. We'll probably just cover that in lab. So that's the end of chapter 1. It's about time to move on to chapter 2. So until then, adios.